So there's actually two approval workflows that go along with the sourcing product. One happens before the sourcing event even goes out to bid, and that's the approval workflow. And that's what this is related to. And then there's another workflow for evaluation, which we'll talk about later. So I'm going to say, yes, I do need ad hoc approvals just to show you what that looks like. For now, we're going to skip over commodity codes, and we'll talk about that later. And then we can move on to estimated value. So if the sourcing event is not for the purchase of an individual item, but maybe just to enable a contract later on, you might leave the estimated value at 0. But if you are kind of looking to purchase a specific item or group of items or services here, you can input an estimated value here. And what that will do later on is we can run reports to see, how much money we saved by running these sourcing events. So we'll go ahead and put in an estimated value. This estimated value is not visible to the suppliers. It's only visible internally. Below that, we can designate a payment term. So here you can tell your suppliers that you plan on using payment terms of 0% 0 net 45, or you could tell them we're going to plan on payment term of 2% 10 net 30. Or some clients like to leave this blank, and instead what they'll do is they may negotiate the payment terms as part of the sourcing event. So either way is valid. It just depends on how you'd like to use the tool. So below that, we've got some of our bid and evaluation options. The first bid and evaluation option is related to whether or not the event is going to be a sealed bid or not. So let me go ahead and explain what a sealed bid is really quickly. So in the scope of this application, a sealed bid is a sourcing event where you, as the buyer, and indeed anyone at CSU, is not going to be able to actually see the supplier's bids until after the sealed bid opening date, which has to be on or after the closing date of the event. So the idea here is you want to protect competition and make sure that nobody's favoring one supplier over another. So you seal those bids. You'll notice if we select sealed bid date here, or select sealed bid yes here, there are some sealed bid opening date options that we'll see later on. Below that, we have panel questionnaire. So what a panel questionnaire allows you to do is invite panelists to rate suppliers in a panel questionnaire. And then that rating can be used to determine who we want to award the sourcing event to. We also have auto score and cost analysis options. So the auto scoring and cost analysis, what this allows us to do is ask questions in the sourcing event, and then the answers, what we would do is configure the possible answers that the supplier could come back with, and you can automatically score the suppliers based on the answer that they provided, or reduce their cost based on the answer they provided. So a good example of this is you may be asking your supplier, if you're buying maybe equipment, you might say, what is the warranty that you would provide for this product? And you might say, well, you can choose from 1 to 3 years, 4 to 6 years, 7 to 10 years, or 11 years plus. So obviously, if they give you a longer warranty, that's better, right? Because you're more protected against failure of the equipment in the future. So you may say, well, if they give me an 11-year warranty, I'm going to give them a score of 15, and I'm going to reduce their cost by 4%, right? Whereas if they said they give you a warranty of 1 to 3 years, maybe you give them a score of 2 and you don't reduce their cost at all. Or you could even go the other way. You could increase their cost. So we'll take a look at that a little bit later. Below that, we've got alternate line items. So what alternate line items allow you to do is accept an alternate bid or a substitute bid. So if you're looking for maybe a 20-inch Dell monitor and your supplier only had a 20-inch HP monitor, they'd be able to, if you allow alternate line items, they would be able to put in a similar item to what you're asking for. The next one, allow split item quantity and evaluations. This allows you to split up the award of a single line item to multiple suppliers if you select yes here. So a good example of this recently is PPE. So you might be asking for, 10,000 masks, but your suppliers maybe only be your suppliers may only be able to provide you with like 1,000 each or 2,000 each because they're running low on stock. So if you allow split item quantity, that would allow you to award different suppliers, or multiple suppliers a portion of a single line item. And then finally, you can enforce minimums and maximums. Again, this is not very commonly used, but if you find that your suppliers are consistently bidding on the wrong unit of measure, maybe you're asking for a mile of cable, but they're bidding on a yard of cable or vice versa. Their pricing may be way out of whack, and you may end up awarding the wrong supplier just based on somebody reading the unit of measure wrong. So what you can do is enforce kind of a ridiculously low minimum and a ridiculously high maximum. And that way, if somebody tries to put in a price that's kind of outrageous, the system will warn them that, their price exceeds the maximum or their price is below the minimum. And then what you would do is set that up on an individual line item level. Below that, we have display and communication. So here you can designate whether or not the sourcing event would be visible on the public site. This is a simple yes or no. And then if you say yes here, it's going to ask you for a short description of the sourcing event. So it is a short description. So we're looking for 200 characters or less. All right. Below that, we have some of our we have the dates related to the sourcing event. So you'll see that it automatically defaults the time zone as Pacific Standard Time. So we can go ahead and select an opening date and time for our sourcing event. So I can go in and select that. Just select something that's already passed. And then you can select a close date for your sourcing event. And again, you can select the time as well. And then because I said that I wanted this to be a sealed bid, I can just default it for the sealed bid opening date to be the same as the close date, or I can give a separate sealed bid opening date. So if I wanted to hold a conference or a Zoom meeting where I, let the suppliers know that, or showed them when I opened the bids, you can certainly do that. So you can specify a different date. So I can say, maybe I'm not going to open it up until the 4th of November, even though the event closed early, or you can just make it the same date. It's up to you. You can also choose whether or not you want to show the sealed bid opening date to the suppliers, and you can choose to close down the Q&A board early if you want to. So you can have it just be the same as the close date, or you can choose to close it down early. So some clients find that their suppliers continue to ask questions up to like 5 minutes before the event closes, which causes issues. So you may want to close your Q&A board down a little bit early. So let's click next. And on the next page is the users page. So here we have a listing of all of the users who will have access to my sourcing event. So your event owners have full control over the sourcing event. So they'd be able to go in and make edits to my sourcing event. You can see the listing of owners here. So if I were working with another campus and I needed to give them access to my sourcing event, what you can do here is you can edit users. And let's just say I was working with Sonoma. So I can search for Jennifer and click Save. And now I've added Jennifer to my sourcing event. So now Jennifer may be able to go in and help me build out my sourcing event if I was working with her on this one. Okay, you'll notice that by default, the other sourcing and contracting folks will have access to your sourcing event to be able to edit it. And then everybody who is in sourcing will have access to view your event, but not necessarily edit it unless you go in and add them specifically to your event. And then at the bottom, we have our notification recipients. So this is who's going to be notified about things that happen in the sourcing event, right? So who's going to be notified when a supplier submits their bid or when the sourcing event closes, that sort of thing. So I can add additional people here, but by default, it's just going to notify me as the event creator. All right, questions on the event users before we move on?
Chris, it's Michelle at Cal Poly.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, on the stakeholders where you have the work group there, they can see in the event and responses. Is this applicable also like in an RFP where you're still in the evaluation stage and they should be confidential?
So yeah, they're all going to have access to the event. By default. Is there a need to make certain events confidential?
Well, when you're in an RFP, you have basically everybody signs a confidentiality agreement. They're protected until you make your final decision and negotiations and then announce the award. So, even the other buyers probably shouldn't see it because they're not in that team. But anyway, just kind of wondering about that. I don't know if David, you want to, have you guys thought about that?
Because the rest of us don't do non-disclosures for
Yeah,
RFPs.
buyers by the nature of their work and their position already have a duty to be not to disclose. It's the external stakeholders that would have to sign the confidentiality agreement.
So anybody you put in there that's not already in the buyer function.
Are you talking about the conflict of interest form where we tell our evaluation committee if they have any stake on any of these suppliers that they need to let us know? Is that what you're referencing?
Well, just overall, the process is still confidential. So just kind of like on that stakeholders, you could edit if you add anybody there, they would be able to see the responses, right? So you kind of have to be careful there.
Yeah, and I think you would have to still do your conflict of interest outside the tool and get those documents in before
and upload them.
Yeah.
For record. But
yeah,
if it's sealed, nobody can see it till it's, even you can't see it if it's sealed. The responses.
There's still that period where it's kind of sensitive while you're evaluating. So I just wanted to make sure those event creator and event managers, those are all procurement people.
Yeah,
Yes.
event creator, yes, those are procurement people.
Okay.
Unless you consciously add someone outside of procurement in there.
Yeah, so if I was to manually add somebody, they may not be in procurement, but the ones who come over from the work group should all be from procurement.
And it's everybody across the CSU defaulting there, not just your own work group?
Correct.
No, which one?
It looks like 88 users, 61 users. That's quite a lot.
As stakeholders, but as far as event owners and creators, that's your work group. So that's your local campus procurement will have the higher access. The stakeholders,
that's everybody.
It inherits other procurement from across, just so we can have campus collaboration, but they don't have the higher access. They can't edit, they can't do anything to
They could see an RFP response while it's still in evaluation.
Yeah.
Everyone across the CSU buyers.
Yeah, once it's open for evaluation, the buyers can. Yeah.
I'm just saying that makes me really nervous. So just wanted to give that feedback.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Next, we have the description section. So here you can add a description for your sourcing event. So you can copy and paste it in. You can type it in, or if we have it in the library, You can select it from a library. Also, if we build out templates for you, the templates may automatically have or may have the descriptions pre-built into them. And you would just need to go ahead and make updates to the description. So I'm going to go ahead and copy one from a library. To do that, I just click copy from library, select the appropriate library, and then select it. So just FYI, we can have as many libraries as you need. So we can have category-specific libraries. So we can have ones for like IT, MRO, capital, real estate, essential, etc. And we can also have libraries by campus as well. So you can have your own campus-specific libraries. So we have as many as you need. So I'll go ahead and select this one. And the idea is, you know, we'd have some pre-built language in here, and you just go in and update it as necessary. Okay, if you were running a multi-stage event, you'd be able to update the stage description here. But we are not running a multi-stage event, so I'm just going to go ahead and click Next. Here under the prerequisites, this is essentially a way for you to require that the suppliers agree to certain language before they're able to successfully bid on the sourcing event. So again, you could have prerequisites pre-built into your templates and they would automatically appear here for you. You can also copy in prerequisites from a library. So I can click add from a library here. And again, you can have as many libraries as you need to. And we can just select it, click add, and then now I've added the prerequisite from the library. And then finally, you can manually add prerequisites that may be just specific to this particular sourcing event. So to do that, I'm going to click on add new prerequisite, and then I'll give the prerequisite a name. So the instructions to the supplier are not the actual prerequisite. Usually you just tell them to accept the prerequisite here. The actual prerequisite can either be uploaded as a Word document or PDF or something, or you can type it directly into the tool. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to click Edit. And I'm going to type in insurance requirements, and then I'll start typing in the text of the prerequisite. And then we're going to pretend that I put in a long and verbose response here, or message here rather. And then you can select the type of prerequisite. So you're pretty much never going to use optional because there's not really a point. And then, so you'll either use a required to view event or required to enter bid. So as a public procurement organization, you're pretty much always going to use required to enter bid because many of you, or not all of you, have to post up your sourcing events in the public bidding site, and you need to allow the general public to see your sourcing events. So you can't really use required to view the event because you need people to be able to view the event even if they don't accept your prerequisites. But you can use this required to enter bid, which will prevent suppliers from successfully submitting their bid until they agree to this language. So this language can be whatever you need it to be, will, like I said, prevent them from being able to submit their bid until they accept it. The one notable, exception might be if you're working on like a research project or something like that, where you have secretive information. You may ask the supplier to accept a non-disclosure agreement, and that might be a reason why you'd want to put in a prerequisite that would require them to accept it before they're able to view the sourcing event, if you have sensitive data in there that you can't share with the general public. All right, you can also decide whether or not the supplier has to upload a file to accept the prerequisite. And if you do that, you can also enable confidential mode rather as well. So we'll go ahead and just say no to that, and we'll save our changes. So now we've got two different prerequisites here. We can continue on. Next, we have our buyer attachments. So again, your template may come with buyer attachments already included, and what you would do is probably just download those, make some edits, and then upload a new version of it. You can also upload an attachment from the library. So, if we're maintaining a library of attachments, you could simply select it from that library and click Add Selected. And then finally, you can upload your own attachments. So to do that, just click Add Attachments, Add New Attachment. And then you're going to select the file from a drive or from your computer. All right, and then after you have uploaded it, you can make comments. Each individual file cannot be more than 50 megabytes, but you can break it up into multiple files if you need to. And save those. And then finally, if you have like a huge CAD diagram or something like that, you can host it on a separate SFTP site, and then you can just link it if you need to. So those are some of your options there.
Hi, Chris.
Yes.
When we add attachments for our RFPs for each campus, does it build up our own library? So in the future, if we were to do another event that needed a similar document that we used from a previous event, would we be able to find it in this drop down here for add attachment? Will it keep all the history of all of that, or do we have to go find it every single time? Do you know?
No, so what you would do is you would contact the template and library managers and let them know you want to add a document to your library. So it doesn't automatically enter into the library, but you can provide that to your template and library managers, and they can add it to the library for you to simply add next time from the library.
And is that Claire or David?
Yes, right now it's Claire or David. In the future, we may consider adding campus-specific template and library managers.
Okay. Yes, that probably is going to be more efficient going forward, because David and Claire would probably be inundated. That would be really convenient, right?
Yeah, we definitely will. We just haven't we haven't got there yet. We're working out the governance on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's good to know. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so we'll continue on. This page just lets you know that your suppliers are going to be able to attach as many documents as they want in the supplier attachments section. So as we continue on, we can add questions to our sourcing event. So this will allow the suppliers to respond to the questions in the tool. And if you put the questions in this question section, the nice thing is you'll be able to compare the answers across different suppliers in the interface. You can also add cost adjustments and disqualifying answers to questions and that sort of thing. So it can be really useful to add your questions in the tool as opposed to just keeping them in an RFP document. So we'll go ahead and add a question. And again, your template can come with questions pre-built into it, so they'd already be here. Or I can go ahead and add questions from a library. So if you've maintained a library of questions, I can see the big list of questions here. I can select it and click Add Selected. So it's just that easy to add questions from a library. You can also come up with multiple groups of questions, and you can manage the group names. So I'm gonna go ahead and edit this group, and we'll call it maybe just general information.
Now, Chris, the library in this part, is that our own library, or do we have to reach out to David and Claire to update this library as well with questions? Or can we do this on our own?
So you guys can have as many libraries as you want. So we can have libraries for categories. We can have libraries for individual campuses. We can have overall CSU library. We can have as many libraries as you need. Right now, Claire and David are managing the libraries, or they're going to be managing the libraries. Like we were saying earlier, as we kind of move forward, we're probably going to give that access out to the campuses and let the campuses manage their own campus-specific libraries.
We're going to do that fairly soon. We just have to train.
Yeah.
We didn't want to open it up until there was no before training.
Yeah,
Right. Okay, no, that's good to know, because everywhere where there's libraries here, I was just curious about that. But it sounds like it's going to be the same across the board, no matter what phase we're in this, as far as libraries.
Exactly. And then the question
Okay.
we're trying to resolve is the existing campus admins that kind of deal with just permissions and what we want them in these where we want to identify other kind of functional leads for the library content.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So that's how you can add a question from a library. Like I said, if you selected a template and the template already had the questions, they would already be here. And then finally, you can add questions directly that are specific to this event by just clicking Add New Question. And you can give the question a name. Okay. So we're going to ask them this question, and then if we're giving them a defined answer, so they can only choose yes or no, or they can only choose maybe yes, no, or NA. You'll notice that you've got some options here. So for one, you can decide whether or not they have to answer the suppliers have to answer this question, or else they can't submit their bid. So I'm going to say yes to that. And then earlier I said that I wanted to use auto scoring and cost analysis. So this is one that I'm going to use it in. I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to do auto scoring and cost analysis. So if they say no, they are not background checked. Maybe I want to give that, you know, a negative, or maybe just give them a zero score and not do a cost adjustment. But if they say yes, they are, I'm going to give them a score of 10. And I'm going to reduce their cost by 5%. And then maybe for NA, I'll just give them a score of 0 as well. So that's how you can set up auto scoring and cost analysis. So now whenever a supplier goes in, if they answer yes to this question, I'm automatically going to give them 10 points, and I'm automatically going to reduce their score, or their cost rather, by 5%. You can also set up disqualifying questions. So I could disqualify them from the entire bid if I check this box and said, for instance, if they say no, they're going to be disqualified. So you get a lot of options there. You can upload attachments as well to better describe your question here. We'll go ahead and save changes. And we can add another question. Okay, and then we can do, you know, maybe a multi-choice here, or you can do a single line text that would allow them to type whatever they want. You can see the list of different response types that your suppliers can give you here. So just, I highly encourage you to play around with these in the test environment, just so you kind of have a good feel for what these all mean. So we'll do another one here, and we'll say, we'll do that as well. Maybe we'll do 0 years, and we're going to give them a score of 0, no cost adjustment, and maybe we'll actually disqualify them if they don't have any years. 1 to 2. And let's just do 3 to 4. All right, we'll save that as well. So obviously you can add as many questions here as you want. You can add groups of questions to help break them up if you have a lot. And you can even add pages of questions. So if you're asking the supplier 100 different questions, you don't want to give them just a big long list of questions. You want to break them up into logical groups. And maybe even if you've got like 100, you want to break them up into multiple pages just so it's easier for the supplier to kind of save a page and move on. That way, if they lose internet access or something like that, they don't lose all their work. So nice to do that. So we'll go ahead and click next. So in the previous page here for questions, these questions are really overall questions about the entire sourcing event. They're not generally questions about individual line items. The additional item fields allows you to give a better explanation, add fields to better explain the line items, or ask questions of your suppliers about the individual line items. So the individual or additional item fields is not used as often, as most questions are about the event as a whole and not about the individual line items, but you do have that ability to ask additional questions about individual line items if you want to. Additionally, under questions here, if you have a bunch of unique questions that you need to ask, what you can do is, put in 1 or 2 questions. That's the easiest way of doing it. And then you can export out the questions and then import in additional questions. So if I need to ask 100 questions, it may take a long time to add them one by one by one by one in this tool. But what you can do is you can export out the questions, right? So I'm going to submit that, and you'll refresh this page, and in a little while the tool will provide me with an export, and then you can download this. And what you can do is you'll notice that the tool comes with some instructions here. So you'll read over the instructions just so you understand how to use the import. And then you'll go to page 1 here and you can start adding questions into this spreadsheet, which will make it a little bit easier and faster to add the questions, right? So if I'm adding 100 questions, I may not want to necessarily, do it by one, but doing it in the spreadsheet might be a little bit faster. Let me just select from here. And maybe this one's going to be a yes or no. All right, so we'll go ahead and save that one just to show you how you can import this in. All right, so now that I've got it all set up, if I go back into my question section here, I can go ahead and import in that spreadsheet. So just keep note here, whenever you do an import into the questions or items, it's going to replace what's here with what you import. So that's why I say it's always best to start adding a couple and then export these, because that'll include the questions you had in there, and then use that template that the system gives you to do the import. So just keep that in mind. So we'll go ahead and import, and we'll choose our file. And we'll go ahead and submit. And if we wait a little bit here and refresh our screen, we'll see that the import worked. So if I go back into questions, here's our new question. Okay, so let's click next. Like I said, you can add additional item fields. To do that, just click create additional item field. You can pick them from the library, but we'll just go ahead and create a new one. Let's see here. Okay, so we'll say maybe this only applies to service line items, and we'll let the supplier respond to this. And you can make it required or not, and then you can decide what type of response you want to get. So we'll save our changes there and click next. Pricing components, again, this is not used as heavily as some of the other things, but what this allows you to do is create multiple pricing components for your individual line items, right? So if you're just buying market basket items, you're probably not going to have pricing components. But if you're buying more complex item like software implementation, implementations may have training costs and implementation costs and licensing costs and maintenance costs and all sorts of different costs. And you may want to compare the different price components amongst your different vendors. So that's one way that you can do that, is you can create multiple cost components here in order to do that. But again, it's not going to apply to every situation. We'll go ahead and skip that one for now. So next, we have our line items. So you can add product line items or service line items. Just like in questions, you can import them in. If you have a whole bunch of line items that you need to add, we're going to add in our group here. Let's just edit this group and call it temp labor. And we'll go ahead and add our service line items. So the difference in this tool between product line items and service line items, product line items ask for a delivery date, and service line items ask for a delivery range, right? So when the services will be provided. So we'll go ahead and add a service line item. Okay, and we'll get a quantity. And we'll do a unit of measure. We'll say hours, and we'll force them to bid on. I'm sorry, we will force them to bid on this one. You can also make the quantity a supplier response field. So if you're buying if you're doing an RFP and you don't know how much of something you may need, you can make this a supplier response field, and the supplier can tell you how much of something that they would need to fulfill the needs of your organization. So we can give a requested delivery date. So we can say we'll need this worker from November 1st through November 30th. And then we can associate a commodity code. We can put in a historic unit price and a target unit price if we want to, but we don't have to. Again, these are not visible to the suppliers. These are just for internal reporting purposes. And we can even attach a document. So we'll add that one, and I'll add one more line item. Okay, so click next. And next, we're going to specify the suppliers we want to bid on our event. So you can search by suppliers by name. Later on in phase 3, we'll be able to search by commodity code and NAICS code. Just FYI, right after we go live with this, we're not actually going to have a bunch of suppliers in there with their commodity codes already associated. So you won't be able to use commodity code or NAICS code earlier on. But again, once we get into phase 3 and we have total supplier management built into this tool, the suppliers will be registering with their commodity code, so you'll be able to search for them by the commodity code. For now, I'll just go ahead and search for suppliers. So there's one. And Mary, would you be so kind as to help participate in this event?
Sure thing.
I appreciate it. And you're under, yep, Mary's event management.
There you go. I could be Mary Poppins too.
Sounds good. So I'm going to go ahead and submit this one for approval.
I
Remember,
like
I
that,
said,
Mary. David
What's
is
that?
David's Donuts. I said I like Mary Poppins. David Key is David's Donuts. So fitting.
I just can't sing.
don't feel bad. I can't either.
And I don't even like donuts. I don't know why I did that one.
Something you usually get at the office, right? You know, somebody will bring donuts in the morning.
Especially on a
sometimes.
Friday.
I don't buy them, but
Yeah.
I'll eat them, and then I don't feel good after.
Right there with you, brother. Right there with you.
But you don't stop eating them, right? You just know you're not going to feel good after.
Oh, I just don't buy them anymore. I just don't buy them.
Okay, you guys are totally making me miss Friday donuts.
Friday donuts will return. Things will get back to normal eventually. All right. So I did say that I wanted to do ad hoc approvals here. If I
I
said,
haven't seen it come through yet either, Chris. I'm still waiting.
oh yeah, no, I didn't submit it for approval yet.
Oh,
So
okay. I thought you did.
yeah,
Okay.
it'll be just a little bit here. If I say no, I don't want ad hoc approvals, what's going to happen if I go and I get ready to submit this for approval? There's no actual approvals in this workflow, so as soon as I submit it, it's going to auto approve. But if I go back in here and I say, yes, I do want ad hoc approvals, I go to review and submit, there is a place in here for me to set up the ad hoc approvals that I need. So that's the difference. I'm going to go ahead and submit this for approval, return to my event, and now if I go into tools here and then go to approvals, you'll see it stops with me where I can set up the ad hoc approval steps that I need. So again, if you don't need approvals for this, you just say no. If you do, it's going to stop here in this step for you, and you'll be able to go to workflow actions and click on add ad hoc step. And we'll go ahead and designate somebody. So we'll search for David, and we can give him a note. Save it. And now we've added this ad hoc step. So I could add 1, I could add 2, I could add 10, however many you need. And when you're ready, you're going to approve it out of your step, and it's going to move on to this ad hoc step where David would be able to review and approve it. So I'll go ahead and approve it out of my step. And now it's on its way to David. For the sake of time, I'm just going to go ahead and approve it on David's behalf. So David, you can ignore it. But that's, David would get an email and he'd be able to review it and eventually approve it or return it or what have you. I am only able to approve it on David's behalf because I have special admin permissions. And then it goes this post ad hoc steps to just let you know that all the ad hoc approvers did their thing and we can approve here. And now the sourcing event is fully approved. And what's going to happen is after the event opening date passes, the status is going to change from approved to open, and it's going to email the suppliers and have them go in and start bidding. So I actually put the opening date in the past, so it does it almost instantaneously. So now the event is open, and we'll be able to go in and watch our suppliers bid on the event. So I'm going to log in to my supplier's email account, and we'll take a look at the email notification that our suppliers are going to receive. There it is. So here's the email notification that your suppliers will receive. As you can see, it says dear and then their name. You've been invited to participate in this. It's a request for proposal. Gives them some useful information about the sourcing event, and then they'll be able to click on the link to view the sourcing event. So from here, we can go ahead and if the supplier had previously previously registered, they'll be able to just log in. If they hadn't, they'll be required to fill out a short user profile, before they're able to bid on your sourcing event.
And Chris,
Uh,
where would they know to go that? Would they just click on trouble logging in and that'll direct them to log in?
No, so if they had never logged into the system before, the link would actually take them to a different place where they would create a user profile first.
Ah, okay, great.
Yep. So we'll go ahead and say, yes, I intend to bid. So your suppliers can obviously read through the summary, they can read through the description, and you'll notice that if they go to questions, they're not able to actually go in and start bidding on this event yet, right? So they can't enter in the item pricing, and that's because of two things. One, they haven't said if they're going to bid on this event or not. So first, they're going to say, yes, I intend to bid. And two, they have to go to the prerequisites and accept your prerequisites. So they can click on these items and say, yeah, I agree to that. Read over this one. Sure, yeah, I agree to do that. And now if they go in here and go to questions, now they can start answering the questions and bidding on the item pricing. So obviously they can also look at the buyer attachments and they can download them. They can go into supplier attachments and attach any documentation that you need. They can go to questions and they can start answering the questions. I'm going to start answering these questions.
And I just submitted my bid.
All right, thank you, Mary.
You're welcome.
All right, before I submit my bid as a supplier, I'm going to go ahead and go to the Q&A board and I'm going to ask a question. Okay, and they can attach a document when they're asking you a question, and we'll go ahead and submit the question. So now I'm going to stop acting as the supplier, and I'm going to go back to acting as the buyer. So your buyers can sign up for email notifications. That'll let them know when they have received questions in their event. And they can also click on this little action icon or the notification bell if they signed up for in-app notifications to see those as well. But I'm in this event already, so I'm just going to go down to Tools and click on Q&A board. And as you can see, here's our question. You know, are the temp workers going to work the holidays? So I can choose to just answer this question, or I could decline to answer it, or I could post a question like this. But I'm going to go ahead and just answer the question. Okay, and then we can select a file to include with our answer, and then you can choose whether or not you want to post this to the public Q&A board, yes or no. So if you say no here, this answer is only going to go back to the supplier that you that asked the question, right? So if the supplier included their name in the original question, then you don't want to post this to the public Q&A board because that'll tip everybody off as to which suppliers are in the event. But if it is a question, that was asked and was appropriate and the answer was appropriate for everyone to see, then you can just say, yes, I'm going to post it to the public Q&A board, post your answer, and now all the suppliers get to see the question text here, so this, and they'll get to see your answer, but they won't see which supplier asked the question, like I said, unless the supplier put their name in the question of the text of the question, rather. All right, so I'm going to go back in as the supplier, and I'm going to go ahead and submit my bid. So I'm going to say concession stand worker gets this, dishwasher gets this, and we can provide estimated service dates. I can save progress, and I can answer these additional item fields as well. All right, when I'm ready, I can go next, certify my statements and information are true and correct, and submit my response. So as a supplier, they're now done with what they needed to do. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. And I'm going to quickly bid as the other supplier. All right, just finishing up here. And I've got both bids in, and Mary's got her bid in. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So if I go into evaluations and go to supplier responses, look at that. I've got 3 bids in the tool. It is a sealed bid, so I can't actually see the bids. I can just see that they completed them. But we'll go ahead and close this event early, just for the sake of this demo training session. And what I'd like to do now is go ahead and run a panel questionnaire. So now that the event is closed and the sealed bid opening date is passed, I can go in and take a look at the responses if I wanted to. Everything's looking good. All right, so let's go ahead and run our panel questionnaire. So to do that, I can go to panel questions and go to setup. So first and foremost, I can decide if I want to run this based on percentages or by points. So I'm going to do it by points, and then I can give a total possible point value. So we'll do 200 points. Next, I can put in a questionnaire close date. So, you know, when's the last day that my panelists have to submit their responses. I can choose to anonymize the supplier information, and I can also make it to where they're only able to see one supplier response per page. Just note that if you want to anonymize the supplier names in order to protect for competition, you need to make sure that when you build out your questions, you're using questions from the sourcing event itself. So that's very important. Otherwise, your panelists aren't going to know what rating to give people, because they'd be like, I don't know, can't even see anything about them. How am I supposed to rate them, right? So we'll take a look at that in just a moment. Next, you're able to give the different ratings that your panelists can choose from. So I can say maybe 1 is poor, 2 is average, 3 is good, 4 is great. So you can do, 1 to 3, 1 to 5, 1 to 10, but I would not go over 1 to 10. It doesn't work as well when you get past 1 to 10. So we'll go ahead and click next. And I'm going to come back to panelists in just a minute. I'm going to move on to panel questions. So again, if you have 50 different or 100 different panel questions to rate on, you can break those up into pages and groups to make it easier for your panelists to find what they need to rate, right? If you just have 5 or 10, then you really just need one page and probably just one group. So it depends on how many these ratings KPIs you're going to include here as to how many groups and pages you need to add here. But for this example, we're just going to have one page. Click next. So here's our group. We can go ahead and start adding questions to our group. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and manage this. I'm going to change the name of our group. We'll call it operations info. And we'll go ahead and go to questions, and we'll add some questions. So like I said, if you add questions from the event, your panelists are going to get to see the question that was asked of the supplier, and they'll get to see the answer that each supplier provided. So I'm going to add a couple of those under operations. And then I'm going to add another group of questions, and we'll call this one AP group. And for this one, I'm not going to add questions from the event. I'm just going to add questions. So it's just going to be criteria for them to rate on. So okay, so that's one, and I'll just go ahead and add another one. That's not how you spell that. All right, so we've added a couple of questions under AP, a couple under operations. Let's go into the group weighting. So you can weight certain questions to be more important than others. All the pages together have to equal up your total point value. In this case, it's really easy because there's just one page. All of your groups within a page have to equal up to the page total. So again, we'll just do maybe like 100 and, I don't know, 30 points for operations and 70 points total for the AP group. And then we can weight individual questions either more or less. So I can say maybe this one's worth 80 and this one's worth 50. So these two have to equal up to the group total. And then under this group, I can just do maybe 20 and 50. Okay.
And quick question. So like if you don't necessarily want it to be a question per se, you're just saying, I want you to provide a response to this particular area, because lots of times evaluation criteria isn't in the form of a question. Can we do that as well too? Or and they can respond in like paragraph or potentially pages form, something to that effect?
So they can provide, yeah, they can provide comments whenever they are responding to the panel questionnaire, which we'll show in just a little bit.
Okay.
So go ahead and save that, and we'll go to suppliers, and we'll add suppliers. Okay, and let's go back to our panelists. So when we're adding panelists here, obviously we can add as many panelists as we need to. So just search for Chris here. So I can have one panelist, 5, 10, 15. And then as you're adding panelists, they're automatically going to be assigned to rate all the groups, but you may have a scenario where a couple of the panelists may only rate like certain groups. So if I had the accounts payable group in here helping me rate these, I may want to only assign them to rate the AP question. So I might have put those in a specific group. So you can make those you can make those visible to this panelist and say that they're required to rate this group here, and you could save this. And now this particular panelist would only rate the AP group of questions. So you can do that, or you can again just have them rate all of them and not worry about it. So we'll just have this one panelist rate them all. And when I'm ready, I'm going to go ahead and review and publish my questionnaire. And we'll go to my responses. So your panelists will get an email letting them know that they're responsible for rating a sourcing event. So they can use a link in that email to get directly into this response here and start responding to the questionnaire. Or again, they can go into the action items or the notification bell and find that. But I'm already here, so I'll go ahead and view the questionnaire. If there's a whole bunch of them, like 100 different things that they're rating, they can download it, fill it out and then import the responses if they want to. But we'll go ahead and just view the questionnaire. And we'll start submitting our scoring, right? So I'm going to go through here and I'm going to say, this is great. That's not good. That's great. And then if I look at this, I can say, okay, that's average, average, and this is maybe good. And then I can put in comments here as well. So I can say, okay, so I can provide whatever comments that I want to. And you'll see here that, you know, with these criteria that I've just added, there's nothing else for me to rate on, right? Like if I was writing this, I can see the question we asked and the response that the supplier gave. So I can rate just based on that. But for these, I didn't select a question from the event. So really I have to know the supplier's name in order to decide what score I need to give them, right? So if you're adding these types of questions, you can't anonymize the name. You can only anonymize the names if you're, you know, using questions from the sourcing event. Okay, but I'm going to go ahead and just start giving these ratings.
Hi, Chris.
Yes.
What we do in ours is we don't have the evaluators evaluate questions
Mhm.
from our RFPs, at least thus far. What we give them are categories to score based around the content of the RFP, like do they understand the qualifications in relation to technical, do they understand the spirit of the RFP, et cetera. That's what they're scoring on. Now, when you said that you can't I thought I heard you, then you said you can't make them, all the vendors anonymous. So in that
Correct.
situation, we're not pulling from the RFP, but we're pulling from the RFP, but their scoring criteria is what we based on. We don't have questions. Are we still able to make the vendors anonymous based on that scenario I just described?
No, no, because I mean they'd have to go into your RFP and look at the suppliers, right, in order to make that determination. You really can't make them anonymous if they're having to look at the supplier's name and see their response in the RFP. The only way to make them anonymous is if you ask questions in the event, and you know, then they can see the supplier's response, and they don't have to necessarily see the supplier's name. That's really only the only way to do it. Otherwise, if you're
Right.
having them look through the RFP, then they're going to find the supplier's name and they'd be rating them based on that. Like they'd be able to see, okay, this is ABC Company's RFP, and I saw their response here and couldn't really
Right.
anonymize it.
So, right. Sorry. So I was thinking of a different scenario. Okay. So, so there's nothing that we can check. They can just go in and look at each one of those vendors' responses, correct? Or do we have to check? We wouldn't check any of the boxes, right?
What Deborah's kind of saying is the same thing what I was saying too, is that when we have that type of criteria, because generally speaking, evaluation criteria is not in the form of a question. So when we need to do it in that manner, what's the best route to take, and how would that scenario look in the tool?
Yeah, so that scenario would look like these questions, right? You couldn't anonymize the supplier name. You wouldn't anonymize the supplier name. You would just ask questions like this. It wouldn't say invoice accuracy over the past year. You'd have, you know, whatever criteria you wanted there. Does the supplier meet the technical specifications laid out in the RFP with their response, or something like that. And then you would give them access as stakeholders to view the RFP, and they'd be able to go into the supplier's responses and, you know, look at it and then see, oh, okay, here's the attachments that they downloaded. I can, you know, look at their response here, and that's how I would make my determination as to how I want to rate the supplier.
And can they download that document to their desktop, or is there a way to make that view only within the tool?
No, if they have access to it, they'd be able to download it.
Okay. That might be an option if we could potentially look at, like, just having the roles have the option to where we can allow our evaluation committee view the proposals, but not download them and keep them on their computers where it could potentially be compromised or shared with other parties during the bid process. That just might be something we really should look at.
Yep, good point, Sarah. So thanks, Sarah. So Chris, so part of the evaluation, we also put some purchasing stuff in there. Are they responsive? Reference checks, which sometimes our stakeholders do, but sometimes purchasing does. How can we block those particular scoring criteria from the stakeholders to responding to, because they wouldn't really know that's a purchasing thing as far as being responsive. Can we block some of that so that they don't respond to it?
Yeah, so that's this, remember that group assignment where I said, oh, well, I can set up a group for AP and then only AP would rate those questions, but AP wouldn't rate the operations questions. So it's all about how you set up the groups. You can have
Right,
multiple
okay, I
groups.
remember that from yesterday. Right, thanks
Yeah.
for that refresher. Okay,
Sure.
Got it. So based on what you have right here, if this gets sent to the stakeholders, they're not going to be able to go into the AP group, right? Based on how we set their access up?
Yeah, based on how you set up the panelists. So you would set it up and assign the panelists to the group of questions that they should be rating.
Okay, gotcha.
But this only affects what they see when they're going to respond, right? So in here.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and submit my panel response. And I'm going to go ahead and close this panel questionnaire early. So, I don't think we all want to wait around here until next month. So I'll do that. All right, so now that I've got my responses in, my panel questionnaire is closed. Now the system will allow me to use that panel questionnaire response score to decide who I want to award the sourcing event to. So if I go back into evaluations and then go to supplier responses, from here, what I can do is go to evaluation actions and I can evaluate all the responses. And first, what I'd probably do is expand all and just take a look at all the different responses that I got. So these are the three suppliers, and we can see the questionnaire ratings that the different suppliers got. We can see the auto scoring that they got. We can see the total bid price and then the adjusted bid price. So remember, I had a question in here that would automatically reduce the price based on the answer that they gave. So that's what this has done for this particular supplier. And here are the answers they gave to the questions. When I'm ready, I can go ahead and I can choose to use one of the standard scenarios that come with the tool. So I can have the tool pick the supplier who had the best I can have the tool rather pick the single supplier who had the lowest price overall. So if I select that, you'll see it's going to choose Mary's Entertainment Management, or Mary's Event Management rather, as the supplier who we're going to award to. So I can go ahead and save that one and maybe just call the scenario lowest price. Save that one as a new one. And then maybe I can do another one. Maybe I also want to look at who got the best auto score, right? And that one's going to be Mary again. So I can save that scenario as, okay. So you can save as many of these scenarios as you want. If you go back here, you can always go to load save scenarios. And if you've got like a bunch of different scenarios saved, you can load them up. And once you're ready, you can finalize the award and approve it. Before I do that, you can click on scenario breakdown, and this is going to show you the different suppliers who are going to be awarded in this scenario. You can go to saving scenario, and this is going to show you the savings based on the historical and the historical unit price and the target pricing and versus what you actually awarded. You can click on panel questionnaire details, and this will show you the scoring that this particular supplier got, or the scoring that the supplier who was awarded got. But we'll go ahead and finalize the award. And if I need to create a contract with this particular supplier or any of the suppliers that were awarded this sourcing event, at this point I can go to scenario breakdown and I can click create contract, and that will start the contract creation process with this particular supplier. So I can give the contract a name. I can select a type here. I can select the work group, I can select the main document template and click next. I'm not going to go through the whole process of creating a contract, but just note that it will start the contract creation process for me, and it will link the sourcing event to the contract, which is really nice. You can always go back and forth between the interrelated contract and sourcing event if you create the contract using this link here. Actually, you know what? Let me go ahead and do that just to show it off. So we'll say we want to include all the line items and click create contract. So now we have this contract related to this sourcing event. If I click on the contract number here and click go to the contract, that takes me to the contract that I've started with this company. And if I want to get back to the sourcing event that generated this contract, I can click on the little sourcing event here and click go to sourcing event, and now I'm back in the sourcing event. So if you know the contract that's related to the sourcing event, you can always get back to the sourcing event and vice versa. All right, so if we go to tools now and go to approvals, we see that it's still in this buyer review step. So after I've awarded it, I can go ahead and approve it, and that's going to move it along in the process. So we've tentatively built out this procurement review step here. So the idea here is if you have somebody on campus who should be reviewing all awarded sourcing events before they're finalized, we can have it stop for that person to review the award scenarios before they move on in the process. So we haven't actually gotten a requirement from any of our campuses that say they need this. But if a campus says, you know, that they want to have an individual at a campus review every sourcing award, then we can definitely have that. But right now, it's just going to go back to the buyer who created the event for them to choose whoever should be awarded. Now, it may not necessarily be them making this, you know, the choice, but they're going to be the ones selecting it in the tool. And then ultimately, you're going to approve it here, and it's going to move on in the process. Like I said, right now in production, it's always going to skip this procurement review step and just wind up in this hold for post-review step. So we'll go ahead and approve it here. So the idea behind this hold for post-review step is for you to be able to go ahead and create that contract and get it fully signed and executed. And also for you to go into the award notifications if you need to and post up a public award document. So if you need to put in a notice of intent to award, you can go ahead and add that attachment here. And we'll just select a document at random here. And you'd save those changes, and then you can go in and publish it. And now on the public site, if someone goes in to look at who was awarded the sourcing event or who's going to potentially be awarded the sourcing event, they can download this document and see, okay, we're probably going to award it to ABC company, right? But at this point, the award is not set in stone. So while you're waiting for that potential protest period to pass, you can keep the the event in this hold for post review step. And then once that period has elapsed and maybe you've gotten that signed and executed contract, you can then approve it out of this step, and that's going to move it to this award to supplier, and that will finish up the process. But just please be aware that once it gets to this award to supplier, you can no longer change the suppliers who were awarded in the tool, right? So if I awarded this to ABC company and I get it approved all the way through the end, I can't go back and change it to XYZ company. That's it. The tool is done. It's not going to allow you to change it from that point forward. So just please be aware that you need to be 100% certain that that's the supplier that's going to be awarded before you approve it through this hold for post review step. But let's just say that that's the case. I've got my contract. If I need a contract fully signed and executed, we've gotten past the protest dates and we're good there. So I just approve it now. And that's going to change the event status from under evaluation to awarded. And like I said, I won't be able to change the supplier who's been awarded the event. After the event is set in stone and the status is changed to awarded, now if I go under award notifications, I can go ahead and send out the award email. So I can go to preview and send, and I can send out this message to anyone who was awarded anything in the event. And this is going to be the message in the tool. So I can adjust this message if I want. So if I don't want to notify people about who participated in the event, I could remove this. And this would tell the suppliers who was awarded something, but it wouldn't tell them who else participated, right? Just participated but wasn't awarded. So I can send this message when I'm ready. And then I can also send a separate message to the suppliers who participated but weren't awarded anything. So I could click on that. Again, I could get rid of anything that I wanted to. Maybe get rid of that, and then I could send that message as well. So we got a question from Michael, and I think that question might be better answered by David or someone else in the team.
I gotta find the question. I was on another screen. Are CSUBUY Q&A evaluations and scoring metrics subject to the California Public Records Act? I would think they may be. I can't provide legal advice, but they may be. I would check with your campus council. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, just making sure that sometimes my mic isn't unmuted.
And David, it's probably, I would say that yes.
I would say it's probable, but I would confirm with council.
Well, anything with the formal competitive solicitation is all public. So there's not much other than your notes that you don't put on your evaluation.
Exactly.
That is not, yeah, that's about it. But yeah.
I'm just not an attorney and I'm not qualified to provide legal advice.
Right, I agree with Sarah. So what we do is, if they want to see the evaluations, we always put on the spreadsheet evaluator 1, evaluator 2, so there's no names on there. And we've never had any issues with that. So that's what we do. But they can't see the comments behind those evaluations. We're not obligated to put those with the request, just the final score sheet. And we've never had any issues.
Yeah, I've provided that information. I just didn't want to provide a legal opinion.
Yes, we know, David. Yes.
Sound like a lawyer, right? Try to get your lawyer to provide a legal opinion. That's fun too.
It's kind of like, I'm not a doctor, but I'll take a look, you know?
Right.
So I get here. Hi, this is Michael from the CO. I have a question on, or a follow-up question on that. Does that mean would it then be prudent not to have the evaluations done in the system?
No, I mean,
Or
everything should be done according, above board. I mean, why not? If you're, I wouldn't have any issues doing them in the system.
Even
but I
if it
mean,
wasn't in
but
the
you'll have the individual comments from each individual person,
Well,
right?
I don't
In the
think
system now, or is that something you wouldn't release?
I don't think I would release the comments
No,
unless I was compelled to do so.
right.
I
No,
think I'd
you wouldn't
release
have,
the scores.
Mhm.
right.
Yeah, the final score. I was just wondering
Yeah.
though if that was if that was part of the question, like
I don't
is
think
the
so.
because I understand the final scores are always public record from that, your final overall scores
Yeah, I don't think
that are.
comments and notes like Deborah, I've read the Public Records Act. I think
Mhm.
exclusive, comments and notes and things like that
Yeah,
aren't subject, but again, it's
your
not.
working documents are typically not are
Yes.
considered those working notes. So like I said, just to follow up with Deborah was saying, all the individual scores from each individual person are considered my working notes, and I do a final summary
Yeah.
page
Mhm.
saying here's the
That's
final
what
summary
yeah.
of everything averaged out for everybody. So I don't even give out
Right.
the anonymized list that I have of 1 through however many evaluators. I don't even give that out. I just do a summary. Here's a final summary page by supplier of the average scores from all the evaluators, and that's the
That's what
public
I would
record.
Right.
provide and have provided. And if there's follow-up, then I take it to council and ask, what else are we compelled to provide?
Add
Right. And I,
just
and,
for
right.
the
And I do remember, sorry, excuse me, when Giovanna and I were working on a big RFP that Arun was involved, I do remember him saying we don't have to provide the comments. We can just do the high level overall summary. And Michael, I think if I understood you correctly when you first mentioned this, the public records requester, they would have to have access to Jagger. So they could never even, in order to see the comments. So they wouldn't even grant access to, we wouldn't grant them access to Jagger. So it's all
that's
private.
that's a whole different scenario. But let me just say, I think it's prudent to say to everybody, the summary is actually applicable. So unless you want to field a ton of questions, I have everybody who does evaluations, they put very high level summaries of why they scored. Otherwise, I don't know about you guys, but suppliers come back and ask a whole hell of a lot of questions of how you get to your score. So, I mean, best practice, and I mean, I've done hundreds of RFPs and we always include that. Never had any issues there and
Yeah.
never have them come back. So I think it's a good practice to still allow some summary, like some
Sure.
type of commentary as to how you get to your scoring.
Yeah, we should be transparent. I mean, people should be doing this in, in that manner. So I wouldn't feel bad about it. And even as a scorer, I've been a scorer. I've also run, hundreds of RFPs from either side. I'm not going to put anything in there that I wouldn't want the public to see.
Exactly. And you could decide what, that's the other piece too, is like you clean up what you put in that, that's the piece that you want to be able to be public.
Well, you also talk to your evaluators and tell them, hey, don't put anything in there that you wouldn't want to be seen in public in the event of a public records request.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it works out.
Yeah.
It totally works out.
All right. I think the key thing here is you gotta try it out in the test environment. Try out the panel questionnaire in the test environment. See how it works. See if it's going to work for your situation, right? It should work for your situation, but obviously try it out in the test environment first.
Chris, I have a question about with the award process. You have that you go make the final award and then you're done with it. And a process, I just was thinking, a way to publicly post our notice of intent before we make the final award. Is there some way to post something within the solicitation that would be public, like in that step before you do that?
Yep. Yeah. So that was this public site award attachment. While it's still in the approval workflow, you can attach a document and then publish it, and that will be visible in that public site.
Okay. So you can post that beforehand. Got it.
Yep.
I missed that piece there, that connection. Got it.
Chris, can you go back to the beginning? I don't know if you went over this. When we're setting up the event, there was a third drop-down that talked about include supplier content profile. What is that about?
I'll tell you what, let me just make a copy of this one because I wanted to show something else anyways. So you can include content from, hold on one second, put in some dates for this. All right, so when you're evaluating the supplier, yeah, you can put in fields from the supplier's profile in here, right? So if the supplier registered and they told you this is my Duns and Bradstreet number, you can include that in when you're looking at the responses to other questions.
Okay, so that's what that is. Okay.
But yeah, typically what happens is, you know, when a supplier fills out a registration, they're going to answer this once and it's not going to change from event to event. So if you put this on here, it's going to pull the information from the supplier's profile and just put it in this question section for you. So while you're evaluating the supplier's responses, you can just see this and it'll pull right over from their profile.
Okay.
And that'll be more robust in
that's
phase 3.
handy, especially if we want to know, you know, if they're small business or DBBE or depending on what's on their profile. I haven't set a vendor up yet, so are those the only choices on their profile, that drop down you just showed?
Correct. Yeah, and this is going to be like Kurt was saying, this is going to be more robust in phase 3. So I would not rely on this yet in phase 2, but as we get into phase 3, it'll be more relevant.
Got it. Okay. Well, that's handy.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Cycles in the columns, stay tuned.
Yeah, so I can see why you don't go over it. That's a phase 3.
Exactly.
Okay.
There's some strategy going on. Yeah.
Yes, there is. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. You know what? I'd like to go ahead and show you guys an amendment to an already ongoing event as well. So let me go ahead and do that. Looks like I have not set up whether this is ad hoc approval or not. So this time I'm going to, for this copy of this event, I'm going to say there's no ad hoc approvals. So as soon as I submit this sourcing event for approval, this is a brand new event. It's just one that the old one that I just went through, I just copied it. I'm going to submit this one for approval, and you'll notice that it's just going to go right to approved because I didn't say that I needed any ad hoc approvals. And then again, the idea here is I'm going to do an amendment to this event just to show you what that looks like from the supplier's perspective. So to do an amendment, first and foremost, your event has to be open. And I'm going to go to workflow actions. And like I did earlier, I can close the event early. I can amend it to make some changes, or I could withdraw the event entirely so I can cancel the event. But I'm going to go ahead and just make an amendment. And I'm going to say, submit that. And tell you what, let me go ahead and refresh my screen here. And as the supplier, before the amendment is finalized, I'm going to go in and start bidding on the event here. And I'll answer a couple of questions. Okay, and then as the buyer, let me go in and I'll make an amendment. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to adjust. Maybe I'm just going to add another question. Okay, so I'm going to add that question. And then after I'm done adding questions, adding additional items, you know, adjusting documents, doing whatever I need to, I have to review and submit that again for approval. And in a minute, it's going to take just a moment, and that's going to combine the events together, the amendment with the original, and it's going to update it all. So I go in and I search for that event now. Here's the event, and if I click on it, you can see that this event has been amended, and you can view the amended changes as the buyer. So this shows me that we've added a question here. And then as the supplier, I'm going to show you the supplier's view now. If I go back and I refresh the screen, it's going to show me, oh, look, there have been amendments, and the supplier would have gotten an email telling them that there have been amendments as well. So they can click on this little link to view the amended changes, and that'll show them, oh, okay, there wasn't a question here before about whether they can lift 50 pounds, but now there is. So I, as the supplier, need to go in and answer that question. So here's that additional question. As the supplier, I can go in and answer that question and continue on with my bid. So that's the way it's going to work. Is you'll do an amendment in the tool as the buyer. After you have submitted it, your suppliers are going to get an email letting them know that an amendment has been made, and if they get into the tool, they can view the amended changes and see which changes have been made. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Very good.
Okay, Chris, so here's a question for you. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you done?
Yep, I'm done.
Okay, sorry. So here's a situation. So here's a scenario. So what if we award this contract, and you mentioned that once you have the vendor in there, you can't change it. So what if it gets awarded, they get into doing the work, and it turns out that they can't do the work, and we have to cancel them. And so now we're awarding to the next highest scoring bidder in this case. What do we do in this situation? Do we just, how do we document that we canceled the original winner and now we're going with the follow-up vendor?
Yeah, so is this a scenario where, one second, let me just find that old event real quick. So is this a scenario where you have approved it all the way through, or where you have not approved it all the way through, you've just gotten this hold for post-review step?
Nope, approved all the way through.
All right, so if that happens, the only recourse you have is to go into internal notes and add a note and say, you know, we originally went with ABC company, we even got the contract signed, but they couldn't do it, so I had to change the supplier. So you can add an internal note for posterity, but it's not going to allow you to go back into evaluations and change the award.
Okay, now will that internal note be highlighted? Because if someone opens up this contract, they're going to say, oh, this went to, you know, Mary's Event Management or whoever the supplier was. But if it didn't actually, because we can't change that, will the internal note be highlighted to trigger someone to go down there and look at that? How would we know that that vendor didn't work out and it didn't go with that?
Yes, it's not going to highlight it, so it's very important that you not approve it all the way through until they actually start doing the work. And if they've actually started doing the work, technically you did award it to them. It's just, you know, things changed later. So so that's my 2 cents is don't approve it all the way through until they've actually started work first and foremost. And if they have, then you truly did award it to them. You know, you could start another event where you know, just invite that one supplier and do another award, and you could link it out. But unfortunately, once you've gotten to the you know, approved it all the way through, the system will not allow you to change the supplier who was awarded.
Okay, that's good to know. So David Gee, is there a time limit by the CSU rules that we have to show it was awarded versus the original intent to award?
Hey, Deborah, I think it says in our boilerplate that we have 14 days to get a signed contract back, doesn't it? I'm going to look it up. Right.
So I'm following up to what Chris said, that he says don't hit the awarded button until you know the vendor has done well on the work. well, if that's going to take 30, 40, 60 days, this could be sitting out there unawarded for 60 days. So that 14 days really won't work.
Right.
Or by then it's too late. We've already, pushed the button. So I'm not sure if we can wait, 30, 60 days into the performance contract before we hit the award button.
Deborah, I just think that's probably something you're going to have to manage outside the tool.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if San Jose State, we go into a contract after an RFP has been awarded and we go to the next highest, scoring bidder because, something happened with the performance within whatever, let's just say 4 months of the contract, we don't go back and post anything anywhere else. It would just be an internal change. And it wouldn't have to do with going back and changing the record of the posting. So see what I'm saying? Like, I'm not sure
Yeah.
if it's relevant to follow in the tool.
Right, I understand. Right, correct. I understand. What I was trying to discern from what Chris said, based on the functionality of the system, if another campus went in to go look at this award, they're going to say, "Oh, great, this went to XYZ company," but they would have no idea that it didn't work out with them because there's nothing that triggers them to go into the internal notes. So we want to make sure that they don't award it to XYZ because they didn't work out. So that's all I was asking.
I guess the only other thing I could think of, David or anybody, correct me if I'm wrong, would be that, they'd go look for the contract. They'd see that let's just say, since we just did the training, you go in and you terminate it via the contracts module, right? Then they wouldn't be able to find the contract in the system. So that probably, I'm not saying that's the best way, but maybe that would trigger them to go back and look and see, oh, is there other notes about this? Oh, okay, maybe there's another, oh, there was another contractor that got awarded. Let me search this supplier for the contract. Perhaps that would be.
Yep.
Right. That would be right. True. That would be a one way to find out, because I think that would be the first way we go is go to the contract module and say, okay, who do we have doing for temp labor? But
Right.
yes, Sarah, yes, they would be able to figure out that way, because I'm not sure that they would go look at the internal notes to figure that out.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I'd be like, where's the
No,
contract?
it's not intuitive. No, I wouldn't either. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't have a clue. But in the contract place, that would be the better place, because there's always notes in that area where you can just put all that minutia in there.
I was wondering, could you link? Well, I was wondering, could you link the second contract in this scenario back to the original RFP or not, or is it just the original contract would be awarded? I guess this question to Chris.
So it depends on whether or not the second vendor was awarded anything at all.
If you didn't, oh yeah, if you didn't award them anything, you wouldn't be able to link it then, right?
Right.
Like in this scenario where you just awarded to one, and then the problem happened, and you had to do a new contract, you wouldn't technically in the system systematically link it to the RFP.
Correct.
Chris, can you post any attachments after you've gone through the awarding process, or add any attachments anywhere?
Yeah. So you can add internal notes and attachments here. And then if you want to add additional award attachments, you can do that to the public site here.
Okay, in that same spot?
Yep.
Okay. If you didn't have any panelists evaluating, would it just kind of be ready for you to just kind of look around in scenario or whatever before awarding?
Absolutely. Yeah. You can definitely say, no, I don't need panel questionnaire. You would say no here. And then this whole tab wouldn't even show up. And then you just go right into scenario analysis.
And then I noticed when you were doing after the after the event closed, that's when you set up your evaluation setup and everything. Can you do that before it closes?
Yeah, on the panel questionnaire, absolutely. You can set up almost everything. You can't select the suppliers because the system won't know. It won't let you pick a supplier until they've successfully submitted a bid and everything's closed. But you can set up pretty much everything else.
Okay. And then on the Q&A board, when you, let's say you have a scenario where the supplier identified some identifiable information in their question and you maybe want to publish that out, but you don't maybe adjust a few things. Is there any way to publish something out back that wasn't their exact question?
Yep. So you can post a question here or ask a question, or whenever I went to the actions, there was an option to post a question like this.
Okay.
So that would allow me to kind of change the text of their question.
Hey, Chris, I think we're seeing your other screen.
Oh,
Looks
whoops.
like I'm.
Sorry about that.
Oh, there it is. Thank you.
I know, I was going to say, is my screen frozen?
And then I was just wondering what the difference was between questions and additional item fields, when you might use what and what the different functionality is.
Yeah, great question. So the question section, that's really for questions that are about the entire event and not related to an individual line item. The additional item fields will either allow you to ask questions that can be uniquely answered for each line item, or it can allow you to provide additional details about each line item. So, you could ask the supplier if their worker is over 18 for each, line item, service line item here, or you could tell, the suppliers, additional information above and beyond what we have here. So when you go to add a line item, you can tell them, the line item name, a description, quantity. You can see all the different things that you can dictate here. But if there's other things that you want to tell the suppliers about individual line items, that's another thing that this additional item fields can be useful for.
So is it almost like you maybe should set up your items before you do those?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Well, so you should have your line items in mind, and you should know what information you need to communicate out to the suppliers about the line items, and also what information you need in. And most of the time, you'll be fine without adding these additional item fields. They're not used all that often, but there will be certain times where you say, oh yeah, I need more information from the supplier about the individual line items, or I need to provide them with more information about the individual line items. So just kind of keep it in mind. But you actually will want to set these up first, because when you go into the items, that's when you'll decide what's needed there. So yeah, good question.
And then I noticed when you had the option to adjust the bid price, like reduce it or increase it by the answer that they gave. Mm-hmm. Is that something that we might use for like a bid preference for small business or DBBE, or is there another spot that will do that in there depending on maybe phase 3 supplier records, or is that a good spot?
I think that's definitely a good spot for now. Yeah, I would go ahead and use that. So you guys will reduce their cost down by a certain percentage if they are a small business or DVBE or micro business.
But it doesn't actually affect, like, go into the contract. It's just a visual type of check, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's just and you can, whenever you go to award the supplier, you can award based on the cost adjustment. So if they both bid $100, one of them was a small business, and you gave them, like, you reduced their cost down by 5%, and you went to go award it, the tool would award it to the small business if you chose to award it based on cost adjusted price. Or does that make sense?
It does, as long as it really doesn't use that price as the price.
Correct. It does not use that price as the price on anywhere else.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, you know what? I kind of was thinking on when you've done maybe post the intent to award, but you haven't done the final awarding in the system, and you were mentioning doing the contracts during that time. Mm-hmm. It's not a requirement per se. It's just a smart thing to do.
Correct. Yeah, it's not an absolute requirement, and you may have sourcing events that you run that don't result in a contract, so you would just approve through in those cases. But it's best practice to to keep it in this hold for post review while you get that contract negotiated and executed. Unfortunately, I do have a conflict at this time, so I will have to drop off here in just a moment.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great day.
You too.